Matt Scratch, and I'm just heading out to my shop, change oil in my dad's 2005 PT Cruiser, which is what you hear in the background. It's got a 5-speed in it. It's actually a pretty fun little car. Matt Scratch, and today I wanted to go over how to change your oil, why you should change your oil, and some tips for when you're changing your oil. So I guess the first thing, oil changes are very important. If you don't change your oil regularly, you're going to have moisture build up in the oil, you're going to have carbon deposits build up in the oil, you're going to have sludge build up in your engine. Fresh oil has detergents that clean out the bad stuff out of the engine, and then it stays in the oil. Some of it sticks in the filter, some of it stays in the oil. And when you change the oil, you're getting rid of those bad things. And you should also be changing your filter when you change the oil. So doubly, you'll be getting rid of those bad things that way. So basically, you should change your oil every 5,000 kilometers or 3,000 miles, I think it is approximately if you're in the US. You can go a little longer if you're running synthetic oil, but basically I like to go more by what the dipstick tells me, so like that's about where I'd probably like to change it. That's actually pretty clean looking still. You could go a bit longer on that, but if it starts to get black, you've waited a bit too long. So if you're driving in the city a lot and whatnot, you may want to tighten up those change intervals if you're noticing that your oil's often black or brown. I've seen on some engines where they have a tendency to build up moisture in the valve covers and whatnot, and that'll get into your oil and you'll have what looks like a chocolate milkshake. That's bad. You don't want that. So if you're seeing that, you want to increase your intervals. Whether you use synthetic or conventional, I believe they both are good, and I think synthetic has a lot of merits to it, especially if you're commuting and you're kind of consistent about your vehicle use, and I would highly recommend synthetic. I'm not using it right now. I'm liking this Castrol GTX, but I mean, it's whatever you like. One warning about synthetic: it doesn't. There's a myth that it creates oil leaks, and there's some truth behind it, because if you have a spot on your engine that's weeping with conventional oil, that'll turn into a leak if you switch over to synthetic oil. So you don't want to switch to synthetic oil if you have any leaks in your engine, unless you're willing to replace those oil seals should those leaks get worse. I would just recommend sticking with conventional on an older, higher mileage engine that's probably got a few weak spots, and you really don't want to get into changing those oil seals if you don't have to, so it would be better to just stick with conventional. Filters, that's another thing. There are different qualities of filters, and one way to be kind of safe is to stick with the manufacturer recommended filter. Like if you have a Mopar like this, a Chrysler product, you'd go to your Dodge dealer and buy that filter. That's going to be a good filter. Or myself personally, I really like the Wix brand filters, which are also available at Napa under the Napa brand name. So, but no matter what kind of filter you use, you still want to inspect it. You want to make sure this gasket's affixed to it and in good shape, and you want to look down inside to make sure there's no debris in it. And you want to check those threads to make sure there's no metal filings in them, because they cut those threads, and I have gotten filters before that had filings left in there from when they cut the threads on the filter. So that's something to watch out for. And also, just I would say stay away from Fram filters altogether and Quaker State. I'm not an expert on all the different brands of filters, but I have watched a few YouTube videos of other YouTubers who have cut apart the filters and gone through them to see which ones were basically designed and built better, and Fram always fails those tests, and I've heard of Fram filters ruining engines, of collapsing, and the cardboard or whatever filter material in there. It goes into the engine, clogs up your oil galleries, and starves your engine for oil. So that's not very good. Also, there's different levels of this bypass or drain back valve in there. This one's like a Teflon or something really good, and I've heard that Fram doesn't use the equivalent quality material for that. That there's wouldn't be nearly as effective as this. Wix always comes out on top in those tests, so I've already used Wix for years because I deal at Napa a lot and I buy their filters a lot, so I just stick with that. And I've never really had a problem other than I have had one that, like I said, it had the filings in there. Now, another thing, I understand through some internet polls and whatnot that a lot of people are not pre-filling your filters, and I think that's really bad. You should at least fill your filter half full or as full as you can get it without spilling a bunch. You can put some in there and kind of roll it around and let it soak in a bit and whatnot, but basically you want to prime that in there. You want to get that wet and get that filter material saturated so that the new oil's going to build up pressure quickly in there and not have a whole bunch of air trapped in the oil on startup. And another thing is you want to oil that seal so that that seal doesn't catch when you're tightening down the filter. You just want to run your finger around there with a little oil. I dump some oil in here too, just to prime that whole area kind of, and I get as much oil wherever I can in these filters before I put them on. Putting them on dry might not harm your engine, but it's why starve your engine for oil a second longer than you need to. It only takes a few seconds to fill up that filter. So that's kind of my rant about that. You may have a differing opinion, but that's what I do. So another thing is don't tighten these with a wrench. Like, they only need to be hand tight as you can get by hand. Really, you could cause more harm than good. You know, you could dislodge how this gasket seals or something by over tightening, and I mean, really, you're just causing somebody extra trouble getting it off. It's never going to come loose if you hand tighten it properly. So there's that. And then don't over tighten the drain plug either, because a lot of them have a tendency to strip if you do. And then you can get the oversized plug, but that's never going to be as good as what it was. So just, you know, if you need to get a torque wrench and look up the torque spec, it's probably going to be around, you know, 30 foot-pounds or less on that drain plug. So what I normally do is I'll use like a smaller, shorter ratchet to do that, so that I don't over tighten it. I just use one hand and give it a nice, you know, firm one hand. And then for wrenches, there's a couple different kinds. It's basically whatever works for you. I like the old school kind like that. Works good for everything I need anyway. So, and then one other thing is when you go to take your oil cap off, before you do that, wipe the you know, dust off first. Even your dipstick, you can if it's real dusty under your hood, and then later on, after you're done filling and you've kind of spilled a little oil around, I like to take that rag and just kind of dust everything off. And that's a good time to also look your engine over, look for anything out of place, look for worn belts, hoses with cracks or splits in them, or wires that are cracked or bared, or things that are rubbing from vibration that are maybe starting to wear through on another thing. You could zip tie out of the way and save it if you catch it in time. So be on the lookout for that. Check your air filter if you're unsure and whatnot like that. Power steering fluid level, again, wipe your cap before you do that. Another thing I like to do is take a piece of masking tape and put on the core support here and mark the date and the how many kilometers or miles, whichever you're measuring in, or on the vehicle at the time of the change. I mean, it's not just the mileage, it's if your vehicle's sitting a long time, even it could absorb moisture into that oil. So that is something you want to pay attention to, not only the mileage, but the time. You know, if it's been sitting in the yard for a couple of years and you're pulling it back out to use it again, give it an oil change before you put some mileage on it again, because there's going to be some moisture absorbed into that oil. Okay, so we're underneath the car here, and we're just gonna let the oil go into the pan. And I also broke the filter loose first, and I just wanted to say that you should also clean around the both the filter and the oil drain plug before you remove them, because you'd never want to introduce any dirt into the engine anywhere. Kind of defeats the purpose of changing the oil if you are in turn introducing grit and dirt into the engine. And another thing, while you're under here, you want to look around for other leaks. Like you can see the rear main seal is leaking and the front seals are leaking, so I actually have plans to I got to do a clutch and a timing belt and oil seals in this car real soon, so I'll be doing videos on all that. But a surprise for me is this. You can see that fresh moisture on the bottom of the radiator, and it's all around the crimp line there. And that's a real surprise, because I know this car had a new radiator put in it about 4 years ago, so but I'm assuming it was just a cheaper radiator, and it's obviously failing there. So I actually believe I have a spare in my inventory of PT parts, so that's okay. I'll get that changed out real soon too. For today, we're just gonna check the coolant level. So you do want to let that drain all the way out until it pretty well stops dripping, if you've got time to do so, because the dirt's gonna be, the sponge, all the nasty stuff is gonna be on the bottom of the pan. So you want to drain as much of it off as possible before you put the new oil in. So one other quick note here, I guess, while I'm under here, is the you'll notice I have it jacked up and blocked up, and I actually only had to do that on the one side. And how I decided which side to do it is if you'll look, the drain plug is close to this end of the pan, so if I angle the car towards it, all the oil will drain out, and also the filter housing is gonna drain out better if the car is angled this way. So kind of look at that and pay attention to that. You don't want to be creating a pool of dirty oil if you're tilting the car the wrong way. Okay, so while the oil's finishing draining out, we're gonna go ahead and charge our filter with fresh oil, lubricate the gasket, and get it ready to go on when we climb under to put the drain plug back. Which brings me to another point. I don't know if you can see there, but I've put the keys on top of the wiper blade. That's something really important. If your car has command start, especially something like that, you do not want the engine to start while the oil's out. So take the keys and put them somewhere where that's not accidentally going to happen. Don't leave them in the ignition. I'm the only one here today, but if you're in a busy shop, somebody might jump in to move it while you're in the back getting some supplies or something, and ruin the engine. So that's really important. And if it's got a command start remote also, normally they won't start if the hood's up. If they do, but still, just to be safe. So with that said, I will go ahead and get this filled up. And make sure you've got no grit on your hands or anything like that when you're going to put the fresh oil in. Give your hands a good wipe. So I just go like that, I slop all around there. Now, just dip your finger in and run it around the gasket. then you can kind of, whoop, don't do that over the car. Can kind of tip that around and get the oil circulated into the outer core there. So I've got that about half full now because I got to tilt that filter right on its side to put it in. So if I fill it much fuller, it's just going to spill out anyways. Okay, so we've gone underneath already, and we've got our drain plug torqued up tight and our filter torqued up by hand, of course. We wiped all the residual oil off because the last step is to go under the car and check for leaks. So right now we're going to do the fill step, and you want to get a funnel and you want to clean the funnel really good. Even if it's clean and it's just got other oil in it, like say you last used it to put automatic transmission fluid in something, or oil in your lawnmower, you want to get that out because you know, different additives and stuff don't mix that well. So, and if it's got dust in it, of course you want to get that out. So just make sure you have a clean filter, clean funnel filter, sorry. And when you take that cap off, sometimes like this car's bad, it's got a lip around here that the seal actually sits down in, but it collects dirt up in there. So I like to really carefully wipe around there first thing so that none of that dirt goes in there. And you get your funnel in there, and then look up in your owner's manual what kind of oil to use for your temperature conditions and whatnot, and look up the oil capacity. I'll save you some guesswork. So I know on this car it's around 4.3 liters, so we're going to go ahead and put that much in. So I think I'm going to kill the camera because you probably don't want to watch me pour oil. Okay, so we gave her a little wipe down there, kind of gave everything a look over, and we put a new tag on there saying when the oil was changed. So now the next step is to go in the vehicle. Well, this vehicle's messy because my dad uses it for a maintenance vehicle. But so now what you want to do, I'll close the door so the dinger doesn't go off. Oh, and I gotta retrieve the keys. What you want to watch for is there's going to be I think it's over here, there's going to be an oil light come on. You want to make sure that goes out in a timely manner. You want to make sure that your oil pressure comes back basically after your oil change. So we're going to do that right now. Oh, where was it? Oh, it's up there. Yeah, just went out. So we are all good there. Now we're going to climb underneath. I'm going to make sure that there's no leaks under there. So you want to check the seal around the base of the filter and your drain plug, and basically anywhere else too. Like these other leaks, I want to have a look at these and make sure they're not out of control. Sure not, they're just leaking. So yeah, it looks like we're all good for this one. So that pretty much concludes how to change your oil. So this one last thing is another thing you should do is the day after you do your oil change, or if you're going to drive a lot that day at the end of the day or whatever, check your oil again, even though you checked your capacities and all that, and you're going to check it again after you run it and check for leaks. You want to confirm it on the dipstick that you've got right at the full mark. You don't want to be over full. A little over full probably isn't going to cause an issue, but if you're a long ways over full, it could start wrapping around the crankshaft. It could start creating or aggravating leaks in your seals, so you don't want to do that. So make sure you don't have it overfull. If you do, drain some back out, and like I say, just reconfirm it the next day just in case a little leak snuck up on you or something. It never hurts. And then of course from there on you want to check your oil quite regularly. I'm not sure what they recommend for that, but every week or two is what I do, depending how much I drive, of course. So